Right, good evening. We're live now. I apologise for the quality of the camera. It's just on a laptop, so the quality's not that great. I thought I'd just make another video because I've been asked lots of questions about joining the Royal Marines and life in the Marines and sort of how to get there. And it's easier than just typing it on online. So a couple of people watching, I'll just get started with some of the questions. So, right, one of the first questions is useful items taken with you in training that aren't on the kit list. I mean, generally, everything on the kit list you need, and there's not much else. The first weekend you're allowed to go ashore, which means off camp, and your training team will give you a list of stuff that you need to get. One of the things that I found really useful, a little tip, is a combination padlock. Because all you have about 4 or 5 lockers, and all your lockers have to be padlocked. So you use the, obviously with the key, when you're doing fizz and stuff like that, or drill, you'll put your keys in a bucket. Obviously, if you've got 60 people in your troop, you've got 60 keys that all look the same. When you get back from that, they're just tips on the floor and you've got to find keys. Whereas I found if you've got a combination padlock, you can lock the other keys in your one locker, put the combination padlock, lock it, and then it's a lot quicker. You don't have to worry about trying to find keys and get back to your locker. You can just get back to your locker and get changed because you only get a few minutes, literally a few minutes, maybe 3 or 4 minutes to get changed and then back out, ready for the next lectures. So that's a good tip. Also, things like the waterproof bags, they're quite useful. Obviously, it's up to the training team when in training you're allowed to use them. Generally, it's phase 2, so you don't really need to worry about that too much, because if you spend loads of money on them and then don't make it in phase 2 training, you've wasted a lot of money. So really, to answer that question is, there's not much on the kit list, or much extra on the kit list that you don't need. So yeah, right. Next one. Situation with ironing boards and irons. Right, so situation is there are ironing boards at Livingston. Obviously, there's a limited amount of them. So again, if you've got 40, 50, 60 people in your troop, everyone needs to iron at the same time. So ideally, you take one with you. If some people can't afford to, so if you can't afford to, that's fine. You can use one there. You can buy irons down. There's a little shop down at Livingston. You can buy irons from the shop there. So ironing boards and cheap irons, or you can carry them down on the train. I know a few people said, "Oh, it's a bit of a ball ache to carry them on the train," and you might look a bit silly. However, when you've got your own ironing board at Livingston, you'll be thankful for doing that. It's literally one train journey with your ironing board, and then you'll be well away. With regards to irons, I know it sounds a bit silly, but you want to buy the best iron you can afford. The really decent irons are between sort of £30 and £60. You don't want a massive one with the steamer on it. You just want an iron. The reason is if you buy a cheap iron, you're bound to knock off the ironing board a few times. Cheap irons, a few knocks, and they'll be broken. Whereas you buy a decent iron, that will last you for a long time. I've got one in fact, still got one I use in training, and that was 11 years ago now. So that's still going strong, and that cost me, I think, about £55. So yeah, decent iron is definitely good, and they go hotter, so ironing kit is a lot easier if you've got a decent iron. So someone asked a question about the commando test, and so like what they're like and how I sort of felt with them. And there's a video on one of the Facebook groups about the 30 miler recently, about like what you do on it and stuff like that. Yeah, it is hard. All the commando tests are hard, but you've got 28, 29 weeks to get there, to get fit enough to do them. So you do the commando test in the 30th week, and was it 31st week? One of the two, I can't remember now. Yeah, so you do them in that time. So by the time you get there, you are pretty fit. They reckon you're in the top 10% of the fittest people in the country as a whole, and that includes all professional athletes and things like that. So you are really, really fit. And so the tests individually aren't particularly hard on their own. They're hard because you've got to do all of them within the week. Especially hard if you fail the 30 miler, because you are then redoing it the next day or the day after that. So you could end up doing 50, 60 miles in sort of almost 60 miles in sort of 2 or 3 days, depending on how you get on. So it's the final Commando test. So obviously the motivation's there. If you pass all the rest of them, you then just need to pass that one, and you will then earn your green beret. So the rest after that training is just the last week you spend doing drill, which some people say is harder than Commando tests because it's quite intensive. You have to be just smart, you have to stand still. Drill was my worst thing ever. I just couldn't stand still. Still can't sit still even doing this. So yeah, but the Commando test as a whole, I personally found the 9 mile speed march the hardest one. That's purely because when I run, I generally take longer strides, whereas on the speed marching, because you all run in step, you have to take quite small strides. So even on that, I generally put myself at the back. The shorter people, or the people with shorter legs, generally go to the front because it's easier for them and backwards. Whereas on all speed marches, I try and put myself towards the back because then I can kind of do my own pacing. So to me, that was the hardest one. Other than the 30 miler, you run through most of the Commando tests a few times before you attempt them, so you know roughly which bits you need to be better on, which ones you can pass easily, and things like that. So that alone gives you confidence because you've been through them. You know, like the things like the endurance course, there's kind of 3 parts to it. There's the obstacle part, the run back to camp, and then the shoot at the end. And like I said, you run through each of the parts individually and then put them all together. And then before the Commando test, you run through a whole thing, even with the shoot at the end. So you know, okay, I need to run faster on the obstacles. I need to run faster on the run. I need to concentrate more on the shoot. So by the time you get to the Commando test, you've been through them a few times. So yeah, just that confidence alone helps. Right, so another question about shin splints, and this is a massive one for a lot of people. I'm not a physiotherapist, I'm not a PT, I'm not a doctor or anything like that, but for shin splints, a lot of the time it's doing too much too quickly. So you go from doing not much phys to absolutely loads, like in a fairly short period of time, or overtraining is quite a key one. On like the forums and Facebook groups, especially for the Marines, you find that a lot. A lot of people put their training programs, and then everyone else goes, "Oh, I'm not training enough. I need to do that, and I need to do this, or I feel good today, so I'm going to do even more." For any sort of sport and stuff, rest is just as important as actually training. If you don't get enough rest, then it just undoes all your hard work that you've done doing training. So things like shin splints and not doing too much running. If you look at the actual tests that you need to do to get into the Marines, you don't need to be running marathons a week. There's no like set distances that you need to run to be able to get it. Some people, I'm naturally all right at running, so for me, running was quite easy. So I didn't do much running to train for it. Whereas you get other people that have never really run in their life. So things like that, and that leads on to the next one is like, how do you get better at things like running? And people that are on the sort of Facebook groups and forums know that I just go on and on and on about it. But if you want to get better at running, you join a running club because they've got professional coaches that are there to get you better at running. Same if I want to be really good at boxing, I'll join a boxing club. I wouldn't just like look on YouTube and go, okay, right, this is how you run, and then do it. It literally costs a few pounds to join a running club, and you can go along. The coaches will tell you there'll be some really good athletes there, and some beginners like yourself. You don't need to be a professional runner to join a running club. And again, they'll do all sorts of distances, sort of short distances, over the summer they'll do track work, so you're doing sprints and stuff. So yeah, stuff like that is really good for getting in the Marines. Yeah, so the next question is about diet. Again, not a nutritionist. For me personally, I just ate a normal diet, sort of balanced, didn't eat too much of anything. And again, I don't know if it's how things are nowadays, but people just want, right, here's a diet plan, follow that and you'll get fit. I don't think it doesn't work for everyone. Like I said, for me, I just ate a normal diet. I'd occasionally have McDonald's and stuff like that, but just nothing extreme. You don't need to be like counting your calories and stuff like that to get in. It's not that sort of job. Some people do, some people like it. And I just found that you can go online and find hundreds of sort of decent recipes and things like that for healthy eating and whatnot, and yeah, just things like that. So next one, hardest part of training for most recruits. Well, the hardest part from my experience is just the mental faith, like part of it. It's not physical. And anyone that's fit enough to get into the rings is fit enough to complete training, like physically fit. And it's when it comes to mental, and again, it's not on camp. And you quite often hear in training the phrase camp soldier. So you'll have some people that are really good on camp, so like their uniform's really smart, they're good on drill, they're good in all the lectures, and the minute you go into the field, they just crumble or go on exercise, so like training out off camp, and they just crumble, and some people are like that. And the reason it's hard in the field is because you're quite often cold, you're quite often wet, you're quite often tired, and they're the times that you really need to have like sort of mental robustness, as they call it, to keep going, because that's what the Royal Marines do. And you sleep under sort of like just a plastic sheeting, really. So in all weathers, like whatever it's like when you're on exercise, and most of the time, most of the training areas that the Royal Marine recruits use, it rains quite a lot. So therefore you are wet, and you don't always have time, and sometimes the training team don't really allow you to put your Gore-Tex jackets on. So you are wet when you go to bed, but that's where the wet and dry comes in. So basically, you don't get into your sleeping bag wet and it with wet clothes on, because obviously your sleeping bag will then be wet, and once it's wet, it doesn't retain the heat. So you basically take your wet clothes off and then get into your sleeping bag. Then in the morning, or if you need to get up and do sentry, which again you will be doing in the middle of the night, you then put your wet clothes back on and then go and do sentry. There are sometimes options where you'll take your wet clothes off, put your dry uniform back on, get into your sleeping bag, wear that in your sleeping bag, but then when you get out, you then put your wet uniform back on. Otherwise, you'll then end up with two lots of wet uniform, and then you'll go down in the cold. So yeah, and like I said, it's so hard getting up at night when you're not used to it, and being on sentry for an hour, going back to bed for maybe even just an hour, and then getting up. So yeah, it's things like that. And then when you get up, your morning routine. So your morning routine, you've got to get up, you've got to collapse your little poncho that you've got up, put your sleeping bags away, put your roll mat away, clean your weapon, just to feel clean. So you only take a few bits or one bit at a time off to clean it. Put back. You've then got to shave. You've got to have a wash. You've got to cook your food, and you've got to do all that in the mornings, and then get ready for a kit inspection. So you then put all your kit back in your Bergen, go over to a certain area, get your poncho out on the floor, and then lay all your kit out, how the training team is showing you how to do it, and then stand there while they inspect it. So it's things like that that can break people mentally, and that's what it is. And that training is designed in a way to sort of see show the train team whether you can cope mentally or not. And that's training is mostly mental. That's what it is. And it's not like I said before, it's not physical at all. It is physical, but not anywhere near as much as you think it is. It's more mental. So things like that are quite hard. Like common mistakes that recruits make, or nods as they're called, because when you're in lectures and stuff, you're always nodding off. Even now, I can't sit through lectures, just fall asleep. But nods are renowned for it because obviously when you're training quite hard, you just want, as soon as you sit down, you just want to go to sleep. So common mistakes a lot of nods make on camp, it's mostly wasting time, and everyone's like guilty of it at some point. But you'll finish work. You might finish at sort of 5, 6 o'clock. Then you go for dinner, or scram, as it's called in the Marines. So you go for scram. Then when you get back, most people just want to chill out. So you'll just chill out for a bit, but then you've got to wash your kit, iron your kit ready for the next day, get any other kit ready for the next day that you need, or any kit that you've used previously, clean it and tidy up. Maybe relearn anything you were taught that you might need for the next day, practicing your map reading and stuff like that. So a lot of people chill out or go and ring their partners and whatnot, and they'll get to sort of 9, 10 o'clock at night and then start doing their admin. So by then, a few people will be asleep because they just got back from work, smashed it, and got into bed. And I was one of those. To start off with, I was really unorganised, and ended up realising that actually I quite like sleeping. So as soon as I finished work, I'd smash all my admin, get it all done, maybe text my parents and whatnot, just tell them what I've been doing during the day, and then go to bed. And there would be some lads, and even like halfway through training, will be some lads that were up till 1 in the morning doing admin. So as a result, the next day they're tired. So then when they're trying to learn something or being taught something, they're not as good at it because they're tired and they're not thinking about that. They're just thinking of other things. So definitely, like a common mistake is not doing your admin, prioritising it. You do get taught things like that. They'll teach you like the fact that it's good to make lists. So if you make a list, then once you've done something, you can tick it off. So you can see what you've been doing and make a list of it in order of priority. So basically, the things that need doing, put them first on lists and things like that, and then work your way down. And that's always useful. Like I said, not wasting time. So sort of lunchtime, again, a good example. You go for lunch, you might, if you're lucky, get an hour. So if you've then done phys in the morning, you've got kit that needs washing. And our training team didn't let us use washing machines for pretty much the whole of training. And there are washing machines on camp. We're allowed to take our bed sheets and that to the washing, like the people that wash them. But the rest of our kit, we had to hand wash it. So as a result of that, we had drying rooms as well. So at lunchtime, I'd go and have my lunch quickly, come back to my room, go and wash my phys kit from the morning or my swimming kit, put it in drying room, and then later on in training, because most of the time we do bottom field in the mornings, so I'll wash my kit, put it in the drying room, so by the time we finish work, it's dry, so I can then iron it, do any other stuff I need to do, and then go to bed. So it's just little things like that that can sort of make such a difference, because again, like when you're there, sleep is so important. Again, with training to get there, like I said, that sleep's just as important as actually training. Well, it's the same in training, and a lot of the guys, or a lot of the people in training, that's where they sort of struggle with. If you've been out on exercise for a week, you've been out the weekend having fun, not really slept much Saturday night, got a bit of sleep Sunday, you then come to work or in training on the Monday and you're tired. So if you start off the week tired, it's just going to go downhill. So you then end up the rest of the week really tired, and that's when people start questioning: is it really what I want to do? And trust me, that once you finish training, it's nothing like training. Which again is another common mistake that Nos make is a lot of people leave because they think, actually, this isn't really what I want to do. This isn't what I thought it'd be. It's not what I want to do. But it's like any training. Once you've finished training, it's a completely different world. It's completely different to sort of training. So hardest part of training. I would say for me, the beginner training, because I've never been in cadets, never done any sort of military stuff. I had an interest in the Marines from when I was sort of younger. I joined when I was 23, so I was a bit older than sort of the average one. But again, I've never done anything like that. So literally everything that we learn, I was being sort of taught it. So you have to pay attention. If you're genuinely struggling with something, the training team, that's their job. Their job is to teach you. So if you don't understand something, you just say to them, "I don't understand that," and they'll reteach you. They might get a bit naughty, but their job is there to teach you. So that's what they'll do. They might have to find a different way of teaching you because you might not be understanding it. But yeah, their job is to teach you to get into the ring or past training, really. Right, let me just see if there's any other questions. Someone said about talk about the medical process. Well, again, I'm not a doctor, and you see loads online about the Royal Marines, and it's run by a company called Capita, who do the recruitment for the army. So again, you've probably seen the news that have not got the greatest reputation. The way you sort of see the recruitment process is it's like a hurdles race. You've got certain hurdles you've got to get over to reach your end goal, and that's just another hurdle. Obviously, when you're filling in a medical form, you have to be honest. If you've had some medical issues in the past, you have to be honest with that. But what I would say, if you've had minor medical issues and you've never been to the doctors about it, don't put that on the form, because you will then just end up spending loads of time and effort trying to convince the doctors that you're okay when it could have been avoided. Like if you've broken your toenail or something like that, snapped your toenail, and you've never been to the doctor and it's healed fine, you don't need to put that on your medical forms because that's then not an issue. If you've broken your leg and you've had to go to hospital for it, and the doctors, and you couldn't walk for 6 weeks, then yeah, that needs to go on the medical form. So just be sensible about it. And again, if you get headaches on a Sunday morning because you've or migraines, and you've never been to the doctor for it, but you just think you've got migraines, it probably isn't migraine. It's probably because you've been out on a Saturday night and had too much to drink. So it's just a bit of common sense. If you want to be silly enough and say you've got migraines, then like I said, you'll spend a lot of time and effort trying to convince Capita that there's nothing actually wrong with you. And I think that's the thing a lot of people go wrong with. They try and sort of be too honest, if you see what I mean. So yeah, that's one thing to try and avoid, basically. Hints and tips on how best to maintain your kit in the field. A lot. A person sort of answered their own question, said, I know you get taught a lot of it, and you do, and it's the little things, and it's prepping for the field. So basically, when you're packing your kit, you prep it in a way so that when you're out in the field, you then don't have to sort of sort it out. So it's even things like on your poncho. Each training team will show you different ways that they do it. But on each of the four corners, I put a bit of bungee. So then when you try, because they've got eyelets, then when you try and put a peg in, if you've only got the eyelet and there's a rock and you move it around a bit and there's loads of rocks, you've got no sort of flexibility. Whereas if you've got a bungee, you can pull it out a bit further, and the poncho can be a bit tighter. So it's little things like that that will help massively. Or, yeah, help a lot. But it's quite hard because each training team will have different ways of doing things, and our training team, each section, their section corporal taught us how to pack our Bergens, and he wanted everyone to pack their Bergens the same way, because then in the dark, if you need some kit, and I've got some kit that you need, you know where it is. Or if I'm injured and you've got to get kit out for me, you know where it is because they're all the same. So each training team will be slightly different with regards to that. So it is quite a hard one. But again, it's like on camp. It's just being organised. You just need to be organised, and you'll be all right. Because again, like when you're doing your morning routine, you're only supposed to have one item at a time. So you get the thing you're using. So you get your cooker out, put your food on. So while you're doing that, you can then clean your rifle. But you don't take your rifle completely to bits. You'll just take one bit off at a time. So it's not having too much stuff out. You'll get some people that their kit is just, it's like they've opened their Bergen and it's just exploded. And so you don't want to be like that. So yeah. The amount of running you should do before training, miles a week, I kind of covered that a bit before. Like I said, there's no set sort of distance or whatnot. I mean, really don't need to run more than sort of 6 miles, but at a slower pace. Whenever you do anything, any sort of running in training, out doing like speed marks and things like that, it's run at 10-minute miles, even when you've got relatively sort of light kit. So 10-minute mile pace is a pretty slow pace. So for the Marines, it's focused on endurance, not speed. So therefore, you don't need to be super fast at running. You just need to be able to run for a while. So to get into training, you just want to be running sort of shorter distances, but like as sort of quickly as you can, because once you get into training, that's when they'll start building the pace up and the distances up and things like that. So you don't. The biggest misconception, and it happens all the time, is people think you have to go into training able to complete the Commando tests. So you need to be able to run 30 miles or walk 30 miles with kit on your back and run the endurance course of that. And it's not true at all. If you go in like super fit, you'll be fine for the first few weeks of training, but then your fitness level will just come back down to the same level as everyone else, and they'll be coming up. So you'll all end up at the same level. And so you don't need to be running sort of massive distances and things like that. It's just sort of wasting time, really. Then final, check through quickly. The final one on here is about the RMR side. So what happens if you get injured in RMR training? Well, first of all, in the RMR, so Royal Marines Reserves training, because it's generally done over the weekends and then one training evening a week, it's a lot longer. It takes about 18 months to sort of 2 years to get your Green Beret, because it's done over sort of the weekends and stuff. If you get injured in training, basically, what they'll do, because most of them only have one troop a year now. So unfortunately, if you get injured and you can't continue with your training, you'll then get back trooped, as they call it. So you then might have to wait another year. So the reserves is a hugely time-consuming, and you have to be really dedicated to sort of do it, because it could end up taking you 3-4 years to get your Green Beret if it doesn't all go to plan. And with that, so you can get sort of personal accident insurance, because if you get injured during training and you can't work in your civvy job, then there's not so much sort of, there'll be support in regards to sort of getting you better, so physical therapy and stuff like that, but not so much financial. So yeah, it is a bit, it could be better, but that's just the way it is at the moment. And like I said, you can get personal accident insurance and stuff like that, and some of that can be quite good and only a few pounds a month. So yeah, it's one of those things that you just have to sort of weigh up before you do the reserves, basically. So I think I've covered pretty much all the questions. If anyone has any more, there is a Royal Marines forum. If you just go up, like type in Royal Marines forum on Google, and it will come up. Or there's a Royal Marines Facebook group. Again, it's a potential Royal Marines Facebook group. So type in potential Royal Marines Facebook on Facebook, and it should come up. Join that, and then ask any questions. They say there's no such thing as a stupid question, which there isn't. The same sort of questions get asked a lot of time, and on that, again, I'll answer it, and I've answered it hundreds of times. But when you apply, there's no set sort of time scale. If you want to apply now and you're still at school or doing your A levels or whatnot, and you don't get your exam results till June, July time, you can go through the whole process, sort of the end of this year, next year, and then once you've finished your A levels or GCSEs or university, you can then go straight into training. You can arrange that. What you don't want to do is wait till you've finished, then apply, because it could be this time next year that you get in. So I mean, so it can take as little as 3 months to go through the recruitment process, but it can also take over a year, just because of things like the medical and security clearances, and certain things can take a lot longer. So I'll wrap it there. Thank you for watching, and I think I've answered most of your questions.